Welcome back, everybody, to the podcast. I'm your host, Pat Flynn. We're joined by a new guest today. I welcome Father Irenaeus Dunleavy to Philosophy for the People, and today we're going to talk about a very important topic, the unassailable truth of Thomistic philosophy, or to be a little bit more modest, I suppose, the perennial importance of Thomistic philosophy. As you know, we often come from a broadly Thomistic perspective on this channel. We've never been shy about that. I'm somebody who's something of an intellectual convert to the Thomistic school of thought. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to just kind of explore the rudiments of Thomistic philosophy. Like, what exactly is it? How does it differ from other schools of thought? And how is it relevant today? So, Father Irenaeus, thanks so much for being here and helping me to facilitate this topic.
Pat, thanks for having me on your podcast. Looking forward to our discussion about, the perennial truth, the unassailable truth of the thought of St. Thomas Aquinas. So, yeah, great to be here.
Yeah, right on. So, first time on the show, I think some formalities are in order. Father, if you don't mind, give us a little background. Who are you and how'd you get to come to be doing all the stuff you do with Thomistic Institute and all that?
Sure. So, grew up in a Catholic family in central Ohio, the Columbus area, and ended up studying architecture and eventually practiced for about 3 years, working for a religious architecture firm. So I went to Virginia Tech, ended up in the Northern Virginia region. So I was living in Alexandria, working in Arlington, and eventually, responded to God's call. And then in his providence, he put the Dominicans sort of in my path. So sort of a surprising encounter. It was, in fact, by the preaching of a Dominican that I really came to know the wisdom of St. Thomas Aquinas. And then sort of through those friendships, could see that, a lot of things made sense when I looked at the Dominican form of life and with respect to God's call to the priesthood. So I joined the Dominicans in 2013. I was ordained a priest in 2020 during the pandemic. Finished my SDL, then I was assigned to Providence College for about 2 years. So kind of splitting time between some parochial work in a parish nearby for about a year and campus ministry for 2 years, and then teaching for 3 semesters, which was really enjoyable. And then the provincial call, and I got to really submit to the vow of obedience and join the Thomistic Institute in June. So that's how I ended up back in DC. So it's sort of a home away from home. I think I've spent over a third of my life in this region. So
yeah. Well, that's great. God bless you, and it's good to have you here. So yeah, let's dive in, Father. Let's get started. Let's make no assumptions. Let's just say somebody's coming in this conversation, they have no idea what Thomism even is. How do you like to introduce people to the perennial tradition, if you will, of Thomistic thought? Where do we start?
Right. So just to define the term, what is Thomism? So it would be a school of thought in which the St. Thomas Aquinas, a Dominican priest of the 13th century, a saint of the Catholic Church, is the teacher of this school. And it's sort of a combination of a type of method, a scholastic dialectic method, in which Aristotelianism, the philosophy of Aristotle, is kind of undergirding it, but it's also enmeshed in the what you could call a Catholic or Augustinian tradition. So Thomas is able to produce voluminous works, his most famous of which would be the Summa Theologiae, but a lot of his other works are available in English. Summa Contra Gentiles would be another famous work, his biblical commentaries. But Thomas was able to kind of draw to himself the vast riches of the Catholic intellectual tradition, and then present a sort of systematized presentation of the faith. And so one thing that makes him especially important, I think, for this is kind of going into where our discussion is leading, but what makes him very important for philosophy is that Thomas was able to truly distinguish between the science of theology, which is kind of a serious scientific endeavor for him, in which uh, the revelation of God through scripture, through tradition, are principles from which the science develops. So Thomas distinguishes from that philosophy, which is more of rooted in the principles of experience and natural human reason. So Thomas is although he is a saint, although he is a man of belief, he's very serious and respectful about, natural inquiry into reality.
Yes.
And so he's a great teacher for the school of Thomism.
Yeah. So one thing I'd like to highlight and get your thoughts on is that, it's when it comes to the idea of Thomism, obviously the name implies a follower of St. Thomas Aquinas, but St. Thomas Aquinas was also himself a follower of many other great thinkers. And something that always sort of struck me about the Thomistic project, if you will, is that itself was a sort of, to use the language of Norris Clark, a creative completion of many other projects. So it's not like it's just radically distinct and unique emergent thing, right? And not to say that St. Thomas didn't, contribute some very unique and valuable insights. He definitely did. But to me, I forget who said this first. I forget who said it. And if you forget the reference, then you can just, I guess, claim that you invented it. Somebody said that don't think of Thomas as like one of the first great medieval philosophers. Think of him as really the last great classical philosopher, right? Who really just brought perennial philosophy, right, to its climax, if you will, synthesizing, the most brilliant lines of thought, not just from Aristotle, but obviously the Neoplatonic tradition as well. And Thomas kind of go back and forth. Is he more Aristotelian or Neoplatonic? I think he's column A and column B, right? Just bringing these different schools of thought into great harmony with one another. And so that always just seemed really appealing to me, in the sense that, yeah, there are many unique contributions that Thomas makes, including his theory of existence. But even that, of course, is like pulling from Avicenna and other great philosophers and theorists and stuff like that. What you have is really, to my mind, a brilliant synthesizer, where the perennial philosophy called Big Tent Platonism, as I've heard it, described before, is really just so well articulated and refined. And in that sense, it's not, yeah, like there's something really appealing about, I think, describing it that way. Do you think that's accurate? Do you like positioning it like that?
So thinking of Thomas as the last great classical philosopher, I do, in the sense that he's a epistemological realist.
Yeah.
So I think if this is kind of a historical question of, right, how do we situate Thomas within the broad sweep of philosophy? And yeah, certainly he's not. He doesn't kind of create his own system, which I think is really a kind of a modern project. Of
Mhm.
you think of Descartes with his discourse on method, and kind of trying to reground philosophy from a place of certainty, which is really a response to a type of skepticism which kind of infects the world after the Copernican revolution, where
Mhm.
we thought things were a certain way. Now science, in like new empirical study, is suggesting that it's not in fact that way. So then really the question of the skeptics, which is a philosophy that goes all the way back to the origins, becomes the chief question of how do I know what is real? And as a result, a lot of the philosophers, not every, but a lot of the philosophers after Thomas, who would be considered modern philosophers, and then onward postmodern philosophers, their project is different than what Aquinas is doing. As you were saying, he's kind of drawing into himself and developing kind of a living tradition, albeit with there was quite the challenge. And Alistair McIntyre will talk quite a bit about Thomas's contribution to the Augustinian tradition, which is kind of predominant in the church, which is drawing a lot from Platonism, Neoplatonism. And then we have the advent, at least in the Latin church, of Aristotle's thought, which comes by way of these Islamic commentators,
Mm-hmm.
and of course Moses Maimonides as well. But Thomas is really engaged in a project that is happening, at the University of Paris and other places within Christendom to try and account for this kind of hylomorphic thought of Aristotle, right? And as a result, he really is kind of in a way, he does come up with his own distinctions, which shouldn't be, underappreciated. But really, what he's, I think, most masterful at is organizing all this thought and showing how it sort of fits together and creating kind of a sapiential outlook of reality.
Yeah.
So I think I'm kind of thinking on my feet with this claim, but I like it. And I think in part, perhaps, maybe this is a good way of describing it. Aquinas is interested in wisdom and has a real belief that we can have contact with it. And I think that's something that belongs to classical philosophy, is a pursuit of wisdom. And in modern philosophy, I don't think there's the same love of wisdom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's a big claim. I'm sure you could, poke holes in it, but
no, that's great, Father. I appreciate it. So, all right, let's dig into some of the core components. You already mentioned one, which is a broad realism. What else sort of characterizes Thomism? What are some of the core commitments and aspects of the Thomistic system?
Right. So, really, the principles of reality being that of act, potency, substance, accidents, esse, and essence. That Thomas has a metaphysical outlook on reality, which kind of corresponds to Aristotle.
Mm-hmm.
I think he goes a little bit further with the real distinction between essence and existence. So that's core. Kind of a investigatory principles would be the four causes. So looking at the reality, or in kind of poking into reality, trying to figure it out based upon this material cause, formal cause, efficient cause, and final cause. I think that's kind of something that would that fact that he holds all four causes also separates him from a lot of modern philosophy, which really looks at modern philosophy would really only be interested in material cause and efficient cause, as opposed to these formal cause and final causes as well. And so Thomas's kind of great love for the final cause, which for him is ultimately God, kind of guides his articulation of reality as well. That everything, to use Marie-Dominique Chanut's expression, Thomas kind of frames his work as an exitus reditus, as things proceeding from God and then returning to God. And because he has this great perception of teleology, that is the kind of the study of ends, Thomas is able to kind of organize his moral philosophy, his ethics, based upon that, which would be like the pursuit of the good. But then also a lot of his views on nature as well, what things are, kind of have a teleology, sort of a law wrought within them. So that kind of guides him as well. I mean, there's a lot more to be said.
Well, one of the things
but I think those are good.
Yeah, no, that's really good, because one of the things that at least really struck me about Thomism and a lot of what was going on in classical philosophy is its systematicity. Its coherence.
Okay.
Like, say whatever you want about its ultimate truth value. Like, it really seems like things hang together and inform one another when it comes to the Thomistic system. Like, Aquinas's ethics is deeply embedded within his metaphysics, and same with his philosophical anthropology and epistemology, right? These aren't just like totally isolated, independent silos trying to work out particular problems, and we're not exactly sure how one connects with another, right? There's this really beautiful unity to his entire system, right? Which to me was at least a reason to think that it was worth taking a more serious look at, right? I think unity is good. Systematicity is good. And I really like, who was it? Is it Father James Brent who picks up on kind of Lloyd Gerson's theme of kind of marking perennial philosophy, and I think this definitely includes Thomism, um, as really is sort of distinguishing it by just a sort of anti of everything that modern philosophy is, right? It's anti-skeptical, it's anti-reductionist, it's anti-nominalistic, it's anti-relativistic, right? If you just line up all these antis, you get a pretty good understanding of what's going on with the perennial tradition. What do you think about that? Maybe you had some thoughts on all that.
I guess I wouldn't want to put classical philosophy or perennial philosophy on the reactionary side to modern philosophy, but I think for a lot of us engaging philosophy, especially for the first time, it is that because I don't think in our educational system that you really are given a sapiential outlook on reality, which is, you speak of it in terms of it's systemization, right? That there's something that holds together. The part is related to the whole in the thought of Thomas Aquinas, and that's in part because he sees things as ordered by the one who is one, right? That all things are coming from God, and as a result, they have a unity of knowledge. They come from the one who is most intelligible. Therefore, there's an intelligibility which we can inquire and know, not in sort of an isolated, sort of monistic sense, but in a connected sense. When I was preparing for this with the question of what is it that makes Thomism or Thomistic philosophy perennial, I was thinking that this is part of it, like its sapiential outlook.
Yeah.
And it's very appealing to, I think, to us because, as Aristotle says at the beginning, the metaphysics, man desires to know, right? So we want to know this reality. And often what we get today is we can know things about reality which are not connected. So it's sort of a kind of an encyclopedic arrangement of knowledge of different specializations, but it's rare that you actually get the connections between these different disciplines of knowledge. And when you discover Thomism and you see that, in fact, there's a desire even to unite these disparate categories, that is appealing. I think that's something that we truly do desire. Like part of our knowledge is part of our desire to know is to know things as one, like as connected in a real sense, and that's something that Thomas is interested in, whereas many other philosophies out there really cast it aside as something untenable.
So let me ask you this, Father, in terms of what's going on now and so much of modern philosophy, where do you think the Thomistic tradition, this is such a broad question, it's almost exceedingly unhelpful, but like, where do you think it can really contribute, right? What are some issues that you see, where modern philosophers are quarreling, that you think that even if it wasn't fully developed in Aquinas, there's a creative completion, if you will, that could happen from the principles of Thomism to really kind of push the conversation either forward or in a better direction than where it's currently at in modern philosophy?
Yeah, so most of my study is in theology, so the broad field of philosophy isn't readily apparent to me. But I think, speaking in kind of broad brushstrokes, I think there's kind of two issues right now that need to be.
Theology is fair game too. There's lots of debates in theology going on, right? Those haven't stopped.
Oh
so
yeah,
if you want to go in that direction,
absolutely.
Yeah,
no,
sure.
but I think I can answer your question.
Sure.
At least put something out there. Yeah, I think like I had referenced this before, that one of the big issues right currently with philosophy is this skeptical stance of engaging reality, and so there's a massive project to kind of reground or come up with a new system that ensures a certainty. Whereas with Thomism, what we find is there's a stance to our knowledge of reality which can account for error with what is truly real, but also there's a certain trust and understanding that we are made in such a way as to know the environment or the reality that we kind of live and move and have our being in. And so you had mentioned our friar, Father James Brent, Dominican priest of the province of St. Joseph, earlier. So he's the one. He may have coined Big Tent Platonism. I know he at least uses it.
He may have, yeah. I know he's kind of drawing from ideas from Gerson, who's actually one of my favorite philosophers to read.
Awesome.
But I think the first time I heard that term was from Father Brent. Yeah, the Big Tent Platonism. Yeah.
So Father Brent basically presents this stance as, for in Thomism, right? And we believe this to be true. Apprehension and reality are the same, right? So the first act of the intellect to apprehend reality means that through our senses, our body, through this kind of sophisticated, apparatus, abstracts from reality knowledge. Through sensible things, we come to know what is universal and immaterial. Now we can make, a second act of the intellect, which would be a judgment, but a judgment is always in response to what is apprehended, right? And so you think of the pencil in the water, the pencil looks bent, right? You can make the judgment that the pencil is bent, but that's because you're making a judgment on what you're apprehending. In fact, the way light is carrying this image, the accidents of this pencil to you through the water, what you see is actually that, right? Provided there's no smearing on your glasses or some sort of disease or defect in your eyes, right? Mm-hmm. So your apprehension, because of you're healthy, is corresponding to the reality, but you can make a judgment that is false about it. And that when you think of the discoveries during the Copernican revolution and the judgments made about reality that are kind of like attacked by this, it's, when you have this system of first act of the intellect, second act of the intellect, you can understand why you can make false judgments about reality, but don't need to call into question your apprehension.
Right. Yeah. And that's a great point, because so much of modern epistemology, the accounts offered really raise the question, I think, that are often quite unanswerable within those paradigms of how we can ever get anything right. Right. The problem, however, with some of the more traditional, realist approaches is it raises the question of, well, how can we ever get anything wrong, which we typically do, right? And I think that the best account out there is Thomas's, right? It goes to show that, no, we can definitely get things right, but once we kind of understand the underlying structure of the human person, we can actually make sense of how we can get things wrong, but not in such a large scale structural way that we have to, like, globally call into question all of our what we think are our basic claims of knowledge and stuff like that. And I think you're right. I think Thomism provides really great resources here. Unfortunately, I think they've been massively ignored or underdeveloped in contemporary epistemology. I can only think of like a handful of people that have really kind of pursued this very systematically. One would be like James Ross.
Mm-hmm.
He's got that wonderful book, Thought and World, and he's got this incredible account of from a Thomistic standpoint of how imagination is the problem. Imagination calls it the master of falsity, but it's necessary for finite embodied beings like us to have imagination, right? Like the trade-off is necessary and worthwhile. But once we understand this, we can have a realist epistemology with a good theory of error that doesn't wind us up in radically skeptical scenarios. And I always thought, like, hey, this is a really good solution. Why aren't more people talking about this? But alas.
Yeah.
but alas, right?
Well, another great philosopher to look into with questions of epistemology would be Therese Corey
Yeah,
from
she's
Notre
great.
Dame.
Yeah, she's been on the show
Yeah.
before, so I would encourage
Oh,
people to
wonderful.
to ch-
Yeah.
to check out her work. So I'm with you. I think epistemology is definitely one of those areas that could benefit from like a heavy dose of Thomism, and hopefully we'll
Right.
see more of that after this conversation. I'm sure that everyone's just going to flood into the literature on that. Give us a
I,
yeah. Go
I could
ahead.
give you a second.
Yeah, please do.
A second would be, and this is currently a project that the Thomistic Institute is engaged with. So Father Thomas Davenport, who I think both teaches at the Angelicum and is finishing his doctorate in philosophy, which will be his second doctorate. He has another one, I think, in particle physics from Stanford.
That's right, and he's been
But
on this show as well, probably about a year or so ago. Yeah.
okay, wonderful. Yeah. So your viewers will be familiar with all these names I'm dropping. So, but he has a kind of natural philosophy and science symposium that he holds over the summer. So we just had our fifth iteration of this in July at the Dominican Analysis Study, so hosted by the Thomistic Institute. And really, the project there is to come up with a common language for the sciences. So everything from physics to astronomy to chemistry and biology. There's a real desire there to allow Thomas's natural philosophy and sort of the principles that work in there to bring about a unity of knowledge. And so I really think Thomism is probably the only viable option right now for that. And again, I think that's an endeavor that appeals to the deep desire we have to know, to see how it all fits together. And so the ordering of the sciences, I think, would be another contribution that Thomism can make to philosophy right now.
Yeah, and that would not be an insignificant one. So very cool. And I think that's just really scratching the surface. But for people who want to go deeper, the Thomistic, and I encourage them to do so because this is such a rich and fruitful tradition. The Thomistic Institute has a lot of great resources, and my understanding is that a new one related to Aquinas 101, which has been fantastic, by the way. If people aren't subscribed to the YouTube channel and haven't gone through the Aquinas 101 series, they absolutely must do so. But you guys have something new coming down the pipeline, like very soon, I believe. So please, before we close out, let's make sure that people are aware of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so as you mentioned, we have a YouTube channel, Thomistic Institute, which we're really excited. We just hit 100,000 subscribers.
Wow,
So we just did the video with the silver play button. And then Aquinas 101 is probably our most popular content on that channel. So I think most people if they've encountered Aquinas 101, they know it through the YouTube channel. But we also have a website that we're updating, and we want to make it kind of more user-friendly or more personalized to your own use. So this is a website launch that's going to come in November, and it gives you the opportunity to establish your own account. And then there's automated tracking of your progress as you watch these videos, try to go through the different courses or seasons we have with the content that's on there. And it's really meant to be kind of an introduction. I think one of the greatest obstacles to entering into the philosophy of St. Thomas Aquinas, like to be a Thomist, is the language, right? You pick up the Summa, you start reading, and it's in English, but it might as well be Greek. So what Aquinas 101 is a series of, they average about 8 minutes in length, these videos, where you have a Dominican or a lay philosopher, theologian, introducing you to some distinction, some idea, some principle in the thought of Aquinas. And it's accompanied by animation. So they're engaging videos. And I know of high school teachers that are using them. I even know of college professors who are using them. It's a great supplement to really kind of enter into the beginnings of the thought of Aquinas.
So, Father Irenaeus, the new website, remind us the address. Is it just Aquinas101.com or?
Yeah, it is Aquinas101.thomisticinstitute.org.
Okay,
So
good. Make
a
sure we
quick,
get that
yeah,
one
a
right.
quick, I think a quick Google search of Aquinas 101 will get you there, but Aquinas101.thomisticinstitute.org.
Excellent. I'll be sure to link that in the show notes so people can click it directly. But as
Wonderful.
for you, Father Irenaeus, anything that you're currently working on, or is there any way for people just to keep up with you and what you're doing? I don't know if you're on the social media or anything like that.
No, I'm not on social media all that much, but yeah, I travel around a lot. I give out my business cards, which has my email, my cell phone. I'm always willing to engage a question about God or human life, human happiness. So, I mean, your viewers would be welcome to email me. It's at idunlevy@dhs.edu. And yeah, I'm a student of Thomas. I think he's a great teacher and helping me to know reality and to know the one from whom reality comes, namely God, the Trinity.
Yeah, amazing. Father Irenaeus, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. I'm going to encourage everybody to get subscribed to Aquinas 101 and check out the new webpage. And hopefully we'll have the opportunity to have you back on the podcast for a deeper conversation concerning more of those unassailable truths of Thomistic philosophy. Thanks for being here.
All right, thank you, Pat.